Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Hello, I'd like to welcome you to our next live session, the Tech Talk on IDS Certification. My name is Sebastian Steinbuss. I'm lead architect and CTO of the International Data Spaces Association. And today with me, at least with audio, we are still struggling with video, but today with me is Monika. Hello, Monika, good to have you here.
Hello, Sebastian. Great to be here. I'm very sorry that you cannot see me now. We were planning to do this with webcam, but yeah, always the trouble for Linux users, which many programs do not support as we would like them to do. So now I'm just joined by phone, but I'm still looking forward to our meeting.
Yes, me as well. And yeah, well, that's basically life in those days, I think. So, but yeah, let's get started with our tech talk. So, I mean, a non-working webcam really reflects the situation that we are all stuck in. So we started with this tech talk because we cannot do really good physical meetings like we did in the recent years. And what we do really miss are the coffee breaks, because the coffee breaks are partly the best of all those meetings when we can meet and chat around different topics, and you can listen to people discussing on things and just ask your questions in between. Well, and that's what Monika and me are doing today. We are going to chat a while on the IDS certification with a strong.
Well, I guess many of you know me by now. I'm a little bit new to the IDS still. I only joined a year ago. I'm with an institute, a research institute for IT security. And yeah, we've been a part of the IDS and the IDSA right from the start, and I was happy to join here as well. And in particular, very quickly found my way to the working group certification, and also became the head of this working group in April this year. And that's also the reason why I'm here today to talk a little bit with you, Sebastian, on the topic of certification in general, and also maybe the questions that all of our attendees may have.
Yeah, cool. So maybe from your point of view, Monika, why is certification for IDS components important in general?
Well, I think in general, the main important thing in the IDS is having a really trustworthy ecosystem, the chances in the IDS to communicate with companies you maybe never met the people before. So it's very important to establish the trust that you really can and want to share your data with them. And of course, one very important aspect is here always, what are they going to do with my data? How secure is really the system? If I transmit my data to them, will it be lost during the transfer or when it's on their component? And certification is basically one approach to really ensure that all participants in the IDS, so all the organizations, but also all the components, all the connectors, brokers, clearinghouses, that they all adhere to a certain level of standard, a certain security standard, but of course also an interoperability standard. And it's really important that everyone plays by the same rules. And certification is basically the mean to verify that people really adhere to these rules and that they offer the right security levels. And yeah, basically the general idea of the certification is having a third party that takes a look at the components, at the organizations, and says, yes, you really adhere to the standards. So everyone who wants to participate in the IDS does not have to trust in the organization themselves that they probably know what they are doing and that they are doing it in the right way, but to have this third party that takes a look at it and only allows people and components to join the IDS that really fulfill these standards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would completely agree on that. And of course, this opens the floor for a lot of subsequent questions. But maybe because I know that this is one of your favorite topics about really IT security. So as far as I know, there are a lot of really security requirements inside the certification criteria for components. And I had a lot of talks about this, explaining people and companies, what do you have to do and what is in there. And I also had some experiences with that. But from your opinion, from your experience, is it really hard for typical companies to achieve the security criteria that we mentioned in the criteria catalogs, or is it something that everyone typically does?
Well, I think there is, as always, a very huge variety in the companies themselves, whether they have experience with the IT security topic, how, let's say, secure their system maybe already is. I think there really depends a lot on how much knowledge the companies already have. I mean, of course, the security we are using, the security requirements we have, they are not out of, they don't fall out of the blue. It's basically like, the recommendation for all the typical standards that if you want to build a secure system that you want to have. Of course, it's a very long list. As security is always a very difficult topic, as you have to like cover every angle. So I think all the concepts, all the ideas are already there, and all the companies can really use standards that already exist. The difficulty is, of course, like getting this overview, this whole view of what are all the aspects I have to think about, how do I have to consider this, and how does this impact my component. And this is, of course, always this all-around view, and this also then breaking it down into all the technical details it comes down to is a challenge, but I think it's also manageable for most companies. But of course, it takes some time and work and effort, of course. But I think it's also worth it having then the trustworthy ecosystem afterwards.
Yes, definitely. Again, completely agree. What I like, I had one very interesting talk, and we talked about the criteria, and the people said, so that's all not an issue. We can do this, we can do that. And then I said, so, but the documentation will also be reviewed in the certification. And they said, oops. So, okay, we have some things to do. But let's continue on that. So what will be certified in the core component certification, and what kind of options are there? I know that there is some super trustworthy thing and something that is basic. So could you elaborate a few words on that?
Sure. Maybe Andreas can show slide number 4 of the slide set I sent in. That always gives a good overview. I think most people that are part of the IDS by know that there are these 3 security profiles in general. There is really the base security profile, which should be like the minimum that every connector really fulfills. It contains parts like, the communication should be authenticated and encrypted. There should be some basic logging. There should be an isolation between the services that run on the system. So basically really, a general baseline that, in my opinion, every component should fulfill anyways, because those are also the important aspects if you build any system there is. But of course, here also the attacker view, the attacker model is more against accidental misuse, against misconfigurations, to really take care that nobody, just by mistake, does an insecure thing in general. Whereas, of course, the trust and the trust plus profiles really target the topic of you actually have an attacker who wants to access your data, who wants to manipulate your communication. And then, of course, you need a lot of more security features that you do not need for the base connector. Of course, that's also the point where it gets more difficult, but of course also more secure if you have data that you don't want to lose. And as this is also often a question, what's the difference between the trust and the trust plus profile? I mean, the requirements look almost the same if you go through the criteria list. The difference here is really also this view on who is the person attacking the connector, who is targeting the topic, because with the trust plus profile you also assume more like this cloud setting. I have my data on the system of an administrator I do not want to trust. And then, of course, you need a lot more protection features against this administrator, which has higher privileges. And what Andreas already shows now is really this variety of criteria that we have. You already mentioned beforehand that the right-hand side, the secure development aspect, and the documentation of all this of the architecture and all the development procedures, which is one aspect. Then, of course, all the core security features, which we of course did not invent ourselves, but took from an existing standard, the 62443. And then, of course, we have some criteria that are specific for the IDS, for the setting we have, which includes, on the one hand side, what kind of communication should be established, but also, of course, the important topic of usage policies and usage control. And then, of course, also the setting, the important things in the ecosystem, like you have to be able to talk to a broker, you have to be able to install apps from the central app store. So those are basically the variety of criteria you have there. And depending on the security profile you have a different amount of criteria you have to fulfill, which is, of course, always based a little bit on the use case we imagine this connector to be used in. So the base connector more for data where you say, we want a general protection, but it's not really sensitive data. If it somehow gets lost, it's sad, but not really critical. And then the higher profiles, if you really have some sensitive data where you say this is really important for our company, that this does not get lost, and that nobody gets access without our approving of it.
Thank you. Well, what I'm asking myself, so how are we going to test this really? So we do have these IDS specific things, which are also focusing a lot on interoperability. And then we have these security related things on the right-hand side. For example, the development documentation shall include something like this and that. So this needs that someone sits down and reads those documents, for example. But what are our approaches for interoperability testing and for testing security features? Can you give us a brief overview on that?
Sure. The plan for the interoperability testing is really set up a test bed which simulates the ecosystem, and where you have a base connector, a trusted connector, but also a broker, and then you can really put this component into this environment. It's also going into later on into the real IDS, and already test there, does it work together with the other components? And this, of course, then does not only include, does it send the right messages? Does the connector itself behave, or the component itself behave correctly? But also, how does it react if someone else sends him a message that's unexpected? Does it respond in the right way, or does it also accept messages it's not supposed to accept? So this is really the question of setting up a testbed environment to verify it in the ecosystem. And then, of course, you have all these security aspects where you have some that you really can test with tooling, either automatically, or you really have to manually verify that, for example, there is the possibility to add a new user and delete it afterwards, which is one of the requirements, for example. So there are many things that really can be verified by doing tests, some automatically, but many of them also will have to be done manually with the specific tooling. And then, of course, we also take a look at the concepts that are there. So to review the documentation, the concepts, to see whether the concepts are sound and whether they fit with what the testing shows, to get an understanding of if the component really fulfills all the criteria. And we also have, if Andreas maybe could go back to that slide one before, where we have these different certification approaches. We also have here these different assurance levels, we call it. So the really basic version of a checklist approach, where the developer fills out a questionnaire that asks, how are you taking care of encrypted communication? And then the developer can say, I'm using TLS, and then you only briefly have to look through this and say, yes, sounds like a valid approach, looks good. And of course, also test the interoperability and run some automated tests. And the concept review, where you really also do a lot of manual testing and review the concepts, as the name says. And then, of course, for those that really want to really show that they fulfill all criteria, there is also this high assurance evaluation, which will also include taking a look at the source code, doing some pen testing, visiting the development site and see that, for example, keys are provisioned in a secure way. So there are really all these different aspects. And afterwards, it will, of course, always be the task for the person operating a connector to say what security level and what assurance level do I personally require for my data before I hand it over. So you can say I have data where it's not so important. If it unfortunately gets lost, then I can accept any type of connector, any type of assurance level. If I have highly critical data, it would of course be more advisable to say, okay, I really require a trust profile or a trust plus profile, either just verified with the concept review or verified with the high assurance evaluation. So this is then really something in the doing that every person deploying a connector can decide how critical is my data, whom do I want to give it to. And I think maybe one brief disclaimer, of course, it's never completely verified with the certification, because we only can check the criteria to the best of our knowledge. I mean, complete security is unfortunately impossible to really guarantee, but of course, the quality in general can be increased and can be verified, and it's of course less likely to really have a critical security bug in a system that someone else reviewed already.
Yeah, but that really includes, in my opinion, that of course, as cybersecurity is an important part of the IDS criteria, but it's not only cybersecurity, and there are additional things that everyone should really do in addition to IDS core component certification. I mean, we do have, in addition, the operational environment certification that pays on it as well. So you typically need both the certification for the component that states the software is cool, and then for the operational environment as well that states, so okay, you are really able to operate a secure software system in a secure manner, so the server doesn't stand around anywhere, but it has something like a lock and a door, and you have good processes in place. So really, in my opinion, also state-of-the-art process that you should set up for really reliable IT infrastructure. And I completely agree, this is required to achieve trust, because this is what we ultimately want, to give data to someone else. And if I give something to someone, I typically want to trust the person, and I want to decide if I want to give something to someone or not, deciding on the trust level. And here we can make it really transparent. Not everything, I think that is clear, and it would be far too much promised if you could say IDS is super secure, 100% secure, but I do really think we are on a good track here. So many questions in my head, but one thing, I think we should add this here at this point, because what you just said, so there is a developer that could do this checklist and so on and so forth, but what are the roles and what is the basic process for certification? So who is involved in this?
Yeah, maybe Andreas can show slide number 6. There I have a brief overview. Of course, the one I already mentioned is always the applicant. So for the operational environment, a representative for the organization that is supposed to be certified, and for the component, the developer that developed this and really wants to have the certification. So this is always the party that has to become active in order to get a certification. They have to say, we want to get certified now. And then, of course, the other roles come into play. We have on the one hand the evaluation facilities, and on the other hand the certification body, which are always directly involved in each certification process. because all this aspect that I explained before, that you need someone that takes a look at the operational environment or at the component. This is really the evaluation facilities that do this evaluation. They take the criteria, take some specification, what they have to verify, what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And they will be really doing this hard work of evaluating, is it really able to be certified or not? Does it fulfill the criteria or does it not fulfill these criteria? But of course, the challenge always is if you have a lot of evaluation facilities, a lot of evaluators as well, you have to somehow make sure that what they are doing is up to a certain level of quality, that they are testing things in the right way, and that they do it in a comparable way as well, so that not one evaluator takes just a look at the concept, says, oh, yeah, they wrote a 100-page document, that's fine, and the other really reads it through in detail and asks questions and invests a lot of time. But to make this really comparable, there's also this role of the certification body, which of course is not only there to supervise what the evaluation facilities does, but also to support them, to provide them with these standards they have to adhere to, with these specifications, with this guideline of how to evaluate. And they will always also be a part of the evaluation processes at the latest, at the end, when they receive the report. And they are then really the central entity that evaluates, okay, I look through the evaluation report of what they verified, what the results of the testing was, and they say, yes, we confirm what the evaluation facility thought, that this is really compatible to the certification, or whether they fail the certification and have to do some more work. And those are, of course, basically the most important ones. And of course, the question then always is, what's the role of the IDSA in all that? And here we have like a two-sided answer. At the moment, the IDSA is really the entity acting as the certification body. They are currently in the process of approving the evaluation facilities, of establishing these standards that the evaluation facilities have to adhere to. But in the long-term view, the plan would actually be to have the certification body in either certain persons or a certain part of the IDS or IDS support organization. And then the IDSA really would be the one that, on the one hand, also appoints and monitors the certification body again. And on the other hand, of course, is also the one setting the general certification scheme standards. So saying what is supposed to be a part of the criteria catalog and what is not. What does a certification body or an evaluation facility need in order to be allowed to take on this role? But as I said, at the moment, this differentiation between the IDSA and the certification body is not yet completed, because in order to get started, we really have the IDSA acting as the certification body for the time being.
Yeah, and yes. And we are doing this really, so it's not really the ultimative solution that IDSA plays really a role as a certification body. We want to really maintain the standard. Together with all our members, we want to maintain the standard and set the rules, but we are not the ones to enforce them. This should be done by someone neutral, but those processes take time. So on the one hand side, we don't want to take this duty, but on the other hand side, we want to bring our ecosystem really to life. And that requires the instantiation of all those roles mentioned here. And so we will act as a certification body, and we are currently, or we start to approve evaluation facilities. I think this will be official in the next week somewhere. So don't tell anybody. But for the time being, we have 5 evaluators at our side that want to get started, to get approved as evaluators. So then real soon we can start with the certification process and to really certify satisfy all the applicants out there. And I'm really looking forward to do that. So please, as already said, don't tell anybody. We will come out with this news during the next days. But that leads me to another question, because we do have 5, and for today on my list of evaluators, Fraunhofer AISEC is not mentioned. But what, for example, about IDS Ready? Do we need something like IDS Ready in the future, or is it something that is going to die with IDS certification? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, maybe to get everyone up to speed who's not familiar with the IDS Ready formulation. I, of course, hope everyone knows about this already. But
Sure.
This is basically really the first step at the moment. As long as the certification is not there, we have this IDS Ready evaluation, which basically consists of the evaluators, which come from the working group certification, discussing all the criteria with the applicant and seeing whether they have like valid concepts for all things that are supposed to be fulfilled for all the criteria. And of course, at the moment, this is really the thing to get up to date for the certification, to prepare for the certification. And at the moment, you receive this IDS Ready label if you really have all this concepts in place. And of course, the certification is a far more detailed process, because they also actually do all this testing and verifying that everything is really also implemented. And that's also the thing that we think this IDS Ready is something that really should continue in a different format. Because I think also in the future, the companies are often will have the problem that they look at the certification criteria and they say, okay, now I have here a list of 100 criteria. What do they mean? What do I really have to do? Is what I'm doing enough to fulfill this criteria later on? And I think this is really the important question that also we as the Fraunhofer AISEC, but of course, surely also other people active in this context, will be interested in assisting the companies with, in really helping them understand what are these requirements, where do we stand, what do we still have to do, is what we already have already sufficient, or do we have some more work to do? And this is definitely something that we would like to continue, even if the IDS Ready label itself will be replaced by the real certification, to really offer this opportunity to assist companies with getting their component up to the certification, with understanding what they have to do and what's still to be done.
And again, I would completely agree on that. Maybe you will not be able to achieve those cool logos then afterwards when IDS certification is in place, so that would be a pity. But I do really see that it's important to have really a feedback from someone who knows more details about all those criteria than typical developers have, and to have something like a continuous monitoring. Am I on the right track? I see this frequently in our research projects where we are active, where companies start to investigate IDS, start to develop, start building things, and then it's always hard for them to align. And then out of a sudden, we come up with here are the certification criteria, check that, and then oops, so what do you mean here, and so on and so forth. And I do truly believe that this is a supportive action, not a mandatory action, but a supportive action to really keep on track with your developments towards IDS certification, and to also get a feedback. So for example, if I start with, I want to have an IDS Trust Plus certified connector, and maybe you see, oh, there is still a lot of work ahead, but I want to make business, you can also get the feedback, please start with the base profile first, and then you can go for the trust level maybe later on. So this is it really helps you in your development and your setup phase. I would completely agree on that.
And this is also what, but by my experience, is always one of the biggest challenges about the certification for all the companies. It really is, usually you more start with taking a look at what are the functional requirements. I have to be able to speak that kind of protocol. I start implementing my system. I maybe think about the services I want to use later on. And then at some point in time, the companies realize, oh, we have to get certified before we really can participate in the IDS. And then they take a look at the certification criteria and I must admit, as the list is pretty long, it's always very hard at the beginning to get an overview of what does this all mean, what does it also mean for my component, what do I really have to take a look at. And here I think some support will also be very helpful in the future to really make this onboarding process more easy for new companies, or also for companies that maybe already started developing something without this criteria catalog in mind, and then suddenly realize, oh, we have to pass certification as well, in addition to fulfilling all the functional requirements we have.
Yes, that's why I typically say to everyone who is new, please start reading the certification criteria, even if you have a way to go towards certification. But there are also important things in there that you have to adopt in an early phase in your design decisions. If you do not do some things in the beginning of your development, then it's hard to change them later on. And to be aware of all those criteria and know when and where to tackle them early in the beginning, in my opinion, from my experiences, really helps. And a lot of things you can easily check. So safe storage of crypto materials. Yes, I'm using a key store. And so there are easy things in there as well, but also complex things where you have to think about. So I just got a message that Andreas shared already the slides. So yeah, so the slides will be shared afterwards. Sorry, I just want to. So, well, I see that our coffee break is over. The people are getting back to the auditorium, and the next person to talk in our virtual session is going to start soon. I think we made a good roundup through all important things about IDS certification, didn't we, Monika? Do you have anything important to add?
No, I think that we covered all the important details. Of course, at the last point, maybe the offer from my side, if you have had some questions raised by this discussion, if you either have questions about the certification process, about the status, or of course, if you want to become active, you want to get the IDS Ready evaluation as long as it's still there, or then start the certification as soon as that's available. Always feel free to contact me or contact Sebastian, and he will forward you to me. If you have questions on the component side, it's always good if you address me. If you are more interested in the operational environment certification, it's always good if you contact Alexei, who's leading the working group with me and is the expert on that topic. That's, I think, the last thing I want to say. And of course, thank you, Sebastian, for this great coffee break.
More than welcome. I would love to thank you, and really an important point. So of course we made a good overview, I think, over the basic principles IDS certification. You can read the 100 and plus criteria plus 50 pages plus on the certification scheme, understand a lot of things, but if you do struggle, please contact us. Of course, you can always contact the head office, but you can also contact, as Monika said, those people directly. They are always willing to help and give you some guidance in the next steps and how to proceed. So then, as already said, I don't see any further questions in the chat. So I think we satisfied everyone who was listening. Thanks to all of you who was listening and at least partly watching our show. Yes, and I hope to see you in our next virtual coffee break again, where we continue our discussions on IDS tech topics. So thanks to all of you. Take care and goodbye. See you next time.
Bye.